There comes a time in the life of every RPG protagonist where they must step outside the bounds of that first town and choose a direction onto which to subject their personal blend of OCD and ADHD. But it's not often one makes that decision at the helm of a spaceship. Sorry, gummy ship. We're gonna be on our way to a new world in just a minute here, but before we take off, the world select menu here has plenty to talk about. These little diorama representations of each world are beyond charming. Look, we can see the first, second, and third districts of Traverse Town represented here. There's one of Disney Castle over here too, the very same one we saw when Donald and Goofy departed, though we are, alas, not permitted to return there. It was almost certainly planned to be a destination early in development though, which would explain why the parts of it we have seen have been so excessively detailed, to the point of having full models and textures never shown in those cutscenes. And we have yet another detail lost to the mysteries of this game's pre-production. Once again in the Kingdom Hearts design dock. You can see what Destiny Islands would have looked like on this map. That is, if it hadn't gotten spaghettified. And a welcome back everyone and everything. Let's actually choose between those two options now. The only information we're given to inform our choice is this level ranking. These rankings are honestly a bit of a meme among KH veterans. Pretty much all it genuinely indicates is the order the devs intended you to go in, as it barely reflects the actual difficulty of the worlds. Now, I'm a normie, so I am gonna follow the recommended path and go upwards here, but there are a few preparations we can take to make our journey along that path a bit more thorough. Beginning with taking the bottom path and spending about 5 minutes goofing around over here until you beat this minigame and unlock the power of the That'll be really nice to have. Now get out of here, Olympus Coliseum, and wait your turn. Back in Traverse Town, there are a few recovery items you can stock up on, and you're gonna want to make sure you have an ether and a decent stack of potions. I'd say at least 5. Now, let's officially embark. Oh yeah, you're not just gonna click on the world you want and be there. This ain't your mama's world select screen. You're gonna have to take the wheel and fly your lazy ass wherever you want to go. The easiest comparison to these gummy ship levels is, of course, Star Fox. Though lacking its style, sense of speed, overall gameplay depth, and anything to do. It's difficult not to be harsh on these segments. They're pretty simplistic, but fair's fair, they're also kinda charming. I can even reach and liken this to the Walt Disney design philosophy that was employed when laying out Disney World's Magic Kingdom. That to really feel that sense of entering another realm, you have to feel that sense of traveling there via their ferries or monorails. So while these ship missions don't have a ton going on and are definitely not what anyone boots up Kingdom Hearts to play, I do feel they do a good job of conveying that these worlds are disparate. The space between them is vast, and certainly not just anyone could have the chance to do what we're doing right now. Here's all you really need to know, because the game doesn't do a great job of conveying it. These heal you, these restore your ship's magic, which we can't use, these restore your ship's shield, which we don't have, these are specials, which, you know what? I don't think anyone knows what these do. I'm only about 70% sure they fully restore all the ship's gauges. These are gummies, basically building blocks you can use to modify your ship or design a new one, and these are blueprints. You get these from destroying enemy ships whose blueprint you haven't obtained yet, which you can then use when designing your own ship. On this mission, the only two we can get are for the Ahriman and the Sylph models. Now this is actually pretty cool. The game's about to be dominated by the Disney half of its Disney Final Fantasy crossover, but the names of most every enemy ship will be a reference to a monster from the Final Fantasy series. Like some of the World Heartless, the designs of some of these ships were even altered in Final Mix, though in this case, it's to better represent their namesakes, like the Ahriman here. Final Mix also attempted to add some depth to this mode, with a high score tracker and some missions you can undertake on repeat journeys. We're gonna completely ignore these for the moment, partially because they'll be much easier, or indeed at all possible, once we've gotten some upgrades to our ship, mostly because I think it's high time we started breaking down our next world. But there is one last excellent detail I'd like to point out about the gummy ship itself. Its name will be whatever the name on the raft was determined to be. Of course, this does mean it will be whatever you named it on the off chance you won that first race with Riku, but in what I'd consider to be the canonical outcome, the ship will be named Highwind, Riku's recommendation. The game never draws attention to this, but it brings to my mind the scene of Donald and Goofy introducing Sora to the gummy ship. He asks what its name is, they say it's the Kingdom model, but admit they've never given it its own name, and he thinks back to what Riku wanted to name the raft. So to honor his friends and his journey's goal to find them, he says they ought to call it Highwind. Alice in Wonderland is a fittingly bizarre film. which admittedly might even be a touch outside my critical range. Relatively faithfully based on Lewis Carroll's most seminal books, it's one of those stories that happens more to the main character, rather than a story the protagonist ventures through. But thematically, it makes for a great first stop on our journey, as Alice's arc, such as it is, serves as a soft parallel to Sora's, and perhaps even Riku's so far, wishing to explore a world apart from her own, which monkey paws its way out of control until she's being taken on this roller coaster ride, learning its rules and attempting to play by them. So let's see how Sora stacks up. We begin with a mirror to the iconic down the rabbit hole scene, and we'll see right away that Kingdom Hearts takes a slightly less figurative approach to portraying the abstract elements of Wonderland. Some things, like this strangely placed fireplace, are taken straight from the movie, but these 2D textures of 3D objects are new. They're far from conventional, but this could be constructed in real life. Perhaps just a limitation of having to build this as an explorable 3D space, but this may well serve as another theme park parallel. Man, this flooring and wallpaper is exactly the same. It's gonna get to be a lot on both our plates if I point out every single faithful little detail, so how about I just show them off on screen as they pop up? That'll save us a lot of time. Another clock! Okay, this is Wonderland, so it's gonna make a lot more sense if none of the clocks here match up, although I do have to point out this one is exactly 2 days slow. If you pay close attention to the background track, you'll hear a surprising variety of clock noises, ranging from cuckoo to grandfather. Their timing, ironically, or perhaps fittingly, seems to be entirely random rather than attached to the song. A definite oddity considering how understated it is. The Bazaar Room earns its title. Honestly, one of the most memorable locations in the whole franchise. Design-wise, only the table and the door are taken from this spot of the movie, whereas all the rest of the decor, as you might guess from the 7,000 rabbit ears, comes from the White Rabbit's house. The time on the clock even matches for once. We'll have plenty of time to appreciate every little thing in here as we go. Let's just talk to the doorknob.
How did he get so small?
No, you're simply too big.
That clocks!
Must you be so loud? You woke me up.
Strange bit of creative license with this character, making him perpetually drowsy, whereas he was rather animated in the original.
Oh, no use. I forgot to tell you. I'm locked.
Oh, no!
But I gotta give props to his voice actor in this game, Corey Burton, who incidentally also plays the White Rabbit.
I'm late! Oh, the Queen! She'll have my head for sure!
He'll go on to play some major roles in this series, so it's funny that this is more or less our proper introduction to his voice.
Why don't you try the bottle? Over there.
The Drink Me bottle is another icon of Alice's journey, but the design here is rather a bit more forthcoming, each one showing a tree growing or shrinking on its label. Now that we're suitably small, we can explore this room properly, and be ambushed by a new species of Heartless. These are red nocturnes, a more magically inclined variety than we've yet encountered, and they have the unique property of not only being immune to fire magic, but being healed by it. A bit of a shame for our first encounter since learning magic to nullify it, but luckily, there are some soldiers we can immolate right over here. Fire is the weakest magic spell in the game, but it makes up for this with its low cost and ability to rapid fire. Despite being the weakest, it's still a powerful spell, though strangely, I can't seem to nail down how powerful. On this file, where I picked the magic rod, I can one-shot a soldier with 24 health, but according to every single source I can find online, fire's damage is a base 20 plus 1 for each magic point we have, so it should be 23? I also tried it on a file with only 2 MP and it was still one-shotting soldiers. I doubt I'm actually the only one here who's got things straight, so my only conclusion is I must be missing something. I reached out to my boy Regular Pat and asked him if he knew what was up, and it turns out he had no idea either. But he reached out to some of his boys, and one Samuel Camel popped the lid off the game's code and found out that the actual formula for fire damage is MP minus 1 multiplied by 4 then add 20, meaning every MP point adds 4 damage to our total, and even at 2 MP we are indeed dealing 24 damage. Good to know, but unfortunately it means I can't trust the wikis anymore. Great! We've also got some small fry over here, and I think it's time we properly introduced these creatures. These are called shadows. They're the most basic enemies we'll face. Yeah, wait a second. Oh, yeah. So, shadows are unique in that they have different stats in every world you go to. In fact, this might as well be the only thing properly indicated by the world's battle level. The higher the level, the stronger the shadows. And while we're at it, here were their stats back in the Awakening, and here's them from the Night of Fate. But only in the original. For some reason, these shadows were heavily neutered in Final Mix to be weaker than the Awakening variety, having only 1 strength. Anyway, the door's asleep and we're too small to do literally anything else, except we can light the stove.
Fire!
Neat. God, you know something? I am a sucker for when games give all their different surfaces unique footstep sound effects. It just shows such care. Check it out. These footfalls on the bed. The hard footfalls of the stone. You'd think this tile floor would be like the stone, but it's a bit muffled. Look closer and you can see it's not tile, it's a rug, and a rather thin one by the sound of that. Ooh, it's so good! Speaking of that bed, our only way forward is to shove it into the wall and use this convenient side entrance. This cutscene's got a fair amount to take in. We've basically skipped right to the end of the movie, and we've barely started. Again, perhaps fitting.
Court is now in session!
I'm on trial. But why?
This girl is the culprit. There's no doubt about it. And the reason is because I say so, that's why.
That is so unfair.
I mean, this is only the second most kangaroo court I've seen on this channel. At least she's honest about it.
Well, have you anything to say in your defense?
Of course. I've done absolutely nothing wrong. You may be queen, but I'm afraid that doesn't give you the right to be so mean.
Silence! You dare defy me?
I want to start with Alice herself, because that voice right there, that beautiful voice, that is Catherine Beaumont, the original voice of Alice reprising her role 50 years on, the legend.
Hey guys, we should help her out.
We're outsiders, so wouldn't that be muddling? Oh, yeah. And that's against the rules.
The court finds the defendant guilty as charged for the crimes of assault and attempted theft of my heart. Off with her head!
No! Oh, please!
Hold it right there!
Yeah, so this sort of Prime Directive Donald and Goofy uphold is such a joke. Like, we're supposed to keep our distance and let things play out in the natural order, as though we're time travelers or something, but I think I can count on one finger the amount of instances where they even bother.
Who are you? How dare you interfere with my court?
Excuse me, but we know who the real culprit is.
Uh-huh, it's the Heartland.
Anyway, she's not the one you're looking for.
That's nonsense. Have you any proof?
So Alice has been wrongly accused of attempting to steal the Queen of Hearts' Heart of Queens, and now we gotta prove it wasn't her. This courtyard... Wait, courtroom? This is one thing which certainly wasn't taken from the film. This ostensibly outdoor area is a room. This could be a reference to the use of landscape artwork as backgrounds in old animated films, or even live-action films, but it gives Wonderland a very underground quality, and I can only speculate on what they were really going for. It's not as though they weren't capable of making an impressive skybox, but it does add to the abstract nature of the world. Well, we can filibuster the trial for a bit by talking to everyone in here, most notably Alice herself. It's interesting, there are even some light lore implications here, that maybe Alice's home is a separate world from Wonderland, and the rabbit hole is an alternative means from the gummy ship for traveling between them. The rest of the dialogue is all pretty amusing. Everyone in here has at least 3 dialogue possibilities. I like this one the most. Yeah, I saw someone suspicious. You! Well, to find our evidence, we'll have to venture into the Lotus Forest, an area definitely inspired by the Tolji Wood, but not strictly present in the film. Unlike this iconic character, the Cheshire Cat, this strange chaotic neutral force who talks in riddles tells us there are 4 pieces of evidence to find, one more difficult than the rest, but if we find them all, we'll get a prize. The liar, the fiend, the silver-tongued mischief maker. First of all, the prize he mentions isn't even exclusively a reward for this task. If we simply find our first piece of evidence right here around the corner and progress things to the end of the world, we'll get that prize anyway. The Power of Ice, a brand new spell. Now it so happens that would be a really nice thing to have early on, but we definitely don't need all 4 evidences to get it. Now these talking flowers, though not as mellifluous, that's the word I gave myself. Though not as mellifluous as the ones from the movie, are kind of neat. A sort of half puzzle based in our command menu. You wouldn't ordinarily think you could target these flowers with an item, even after they tell you to, so it's a small aha moment when you get there. Give this one a potion and we're once again full-sized. Now hop on this stump and turn this lotus image into a lotus. Shrink back down by eating this nut, hop all the way up and over, find ourselves back in the bazaar room, and make one last jump from the faucet to obtain the claw marks, the only evidence necessary to get the blizzard spell. Now blizzard is very nearly a direct upgrade from fire, with a base power of... Wait, hold on. If the wiki was wrong about fire, this time the cavalry had to call in the cavalry of their own, so a huge thanks to Samuel Camel, David Russell, and Luna Flair for lending their efforts to... Oh no. Is that Euler's number? Blizzard's damage is calculated with the mathematical constant most commonly associated with compound interest. No, my bad, KH Wiki. You do you. I can see why you didn't want to tangle with this can of worms after all. Though shorter range than fire, it launches 7 projectiles at once in a spread. Here's a weird bit of sort of misinformation I hear spread about this spell a lot. People will tell you that this spell has 2 possible patterns depending on if you're airborne or not. This isn't really the case. It's just that the bottom 2 projectiles slide along the ground instead of crashing into it. You can tell by watching the pattern when firing from just barely off the ground, or what happens when you fire from a vantage point. Now there's a great place to try out our new toy, and that's by heading back into the rabbit hole. A few waves of Heartless will pour in, and hey, we're all technically full-sized now, so it's very sporting of them to attack us in miniature forms when we're hanging out in the rest of the world. Here's another bit of sort of misinformation. Red Nocturnes are weak to Blizzard. Now this does not mean they take bonus damage from it. They take as much damage as the soldiers do, but if they were strong enough to survive a hit from it, they would be stunned. They are, however, resistant to thunder, which, along with the tech point bonus, definitely gives the impression they're weak to ice. But no, not weak to it in the traditional sense. By the way, I'm gonna save going over thunder until we cover Olympus. In the meantime, it's lightning. It's awesome. What else do you need to know? After beating the rabbit hole Heartless, we'll be rewarded with a camping set. Now there are actually 3 possible rewards we can get in this room depending on how far in the game we are. And I've often heard it said that you can only get one of these rewards on a single file, but I've tested it on every version of the game I own, and it doesn't seem to be the case. So I say go wild and pick this up now. Now even though there's very little stopping us from progressing on, let's explore the rest of the woods and get the rest of the evidence. This flower will exchange a camping set for an ether. This one by the first evidence box will give you a high potion for a potion. This blue trinity right near that will give us a tent, a potion, and an ether to replace the one we just used, and this red flower a bit further down will take it right back for more camping supplies. Take this entrance on the side of the tree to land on the stove in the bazaar room where we can find a stench. Not usually where you want to find one of those. And we now have the power to extinguish the stove. Also neat. Our last bit of evidence is right up this set of mushrooms, but we can also hop over the nut and open a chest containing our first set of Dalmatians, 16, 17, and 18. And here's something really stupid I'm gonna commit to for this project. Every time we find puppies, I'm gonna go back to the puppy house and show where in the house they actually popped up. Here we got 2 under the couch and 1 under the dining room table. We'll see how far we actually make it before I completely lose my mind. Back in court, we've gathered our evidence. The Queen has unique dialogue here if you only grab 1 piece of evidence. That's it? All the dialogue's updated in this room now. We don't get a lot of opportunities to talk to Tweedledon and Tweedlegoo over here, though most of the text is fairly generic. The doorways are just gone, though. That's kind of unsettling.
Maybe?
Oh, very well. But get on with it!
So regardless of how much we found, there are always 5 bits of evidence, and we can only pick 1. The Queen's will always contain either Donald, Goofy, or both, and ours will contain a soldier. Of course, nothing will actually convince the Queen of Hearts she was wrong. The only thing this determines is which party members we get to have during the ensuing battle. We'll only keep both if we pick a soldier, and there's even a trick to it. Your evidence will always be the first to hit the ground after they shuffle. But none of this really matters, and I'll go over why in the boss bio. The Queen of Hearts. doesn't like to get her hands dirty, and this really isn't a fight with her at all, but I wasn't gonna give the tower its own mural. Our goal is to destroy the wench holding up Alice, while evading or fending off the queen's card guards. 2 spades and 3 hearts. None of them are particularly difficult foes, but they're tankier than most heartless, don't die, but instead become incapacitated and revive after a few moments, and can be a real threat when all ganging up at you at once. Luckily, the measures you have against that are numerous. Simply having Double and Goombie on the field will split their attention, and even if they're in cages, you can bust them out in like 10 seconds. The queen can also play a role in making this fight way easier. Though she's not an active participant, you can hop up to her throne and smack her one. Whenever you do, the heart cards will freak out and stop fighting until she composes herself. A cute detail that only her own suit is concerned, and the spades aren't as loyal. But if that weren't enough, like guard armor, the tower's gears drop HP, which makes wailing on it and ignoring everything anyway a pretty valid strategy. Barely a boss fight, honestly. But since it's so easy, it's much more interesting for the little details you miss while blazing through it. Like the fact that the red guards have specific posts they won't leave until you either attack them or get too close, or that the cage sinks lower with every gear we destroy. But topple the tower, and let's resume our court proceedings. By the way, this bird holding up the cage is a reference to the flamingo croquet mallets. So with Alice missing, this feels like a fitting time to once again bring up the design doc. There's a dive to the heart stained glass mural design for Alice that went unused. Now this has a lot of really interesting ramifications I can't really get into without spoiling, so we'll have to come back to this later. In the meantime, if you already know what these murals represent, then you already know why Alice couldn't be used in the tutorial. But if you don't, consider this your first proper hint. Now back in the courtyard, these cards remain ever so chatty. Here's my favorite this time. Ow, why'd you hit me so hard? Again, I love when NPCs react to things like this. Trouble is, despite his presence in the cutscene, there wasn't a 10 of spades in that fight. Back in the Lotus Forest, Cheshire's back to give us another tip, and then we'll start encountering large bodies, which are more likely to kill you than that boss fight was. Heavy-duty Heartless, immune to physical attacks from the front, and with a second phase rage mode when they fall to half HP. Lay it on with the magic, and don't be afraid to use Doland and Gifu as human shields. Large bodies aren't the only new Heartless we can find. Head back to the Bazaar Room, chop through a couple waves of shadows, and then get jump-scared by these chonkers. So it's very sporting of them to attack us in miniature form when hanging out in the rest of the world. I like to call that move foreshadowing. These are Gigas Shadows. Yeah, rolls right off the tongue, but the name's a reference to a Final Fantasy monster, so I forgive it. Now these are what I believe is known as a rare Heartless, which I think is the community term given to any Heartless that's only ever found in one room. They were added in Final Mix, and most rare Heartless have completely unique rewards, but unique conditions as well. These big guys, for example, escape the fight if they manage to land a hit on Sora, and every subsequent one we beat grants us better drops. However, they're surprisingly threatening for oversized shadows, and without more tools at our disposal, it's not super worth trying to farm the materials we can't even use for a while anyway. Now a lot has changed in the Lotus Forest, starting with this rock the Cheshire Cat launched at us. It came from over here, meaning this door is unblocked, granting us access to the Tea Party Garden. At this point, I hardly feel I even need to mention all the details they got right, but the lanterns, this cottage, the gate we came in through, even the background this time. A little bit of a shame the March Hare and the Suits and Dresses guy are just a picture here, but perhaps it's for the best. We're invited to sit down for an unbirthday present, it seems, and what a coincidence, it's my unbirthday today, so I do believe I shall partake. Whoa, wait. So obviously I can't read this sign, but it does change every time it has a new bit of text for you to read. Now only the plushest, pinkest of chairs will do for me, oh, how dare you? Fine, how about the second plushest, pinkest chair, Oh, this is the worst unbirthday ever. Those 2 chairs are trolls. All the rest will actually give quite helpful gifts. A couple of potions, an ether, and an elixir. All for my unbirthday. The portrait in the back is unsettlingly lively. Their poses become more excited depending on how many gifts we've gotten, or to panic when we get a large body. Now that adorable cottage is calling my name, but go back to the Lotus Garden and you may encounter a few friends. White mushrooms return in all their adorable glory, and this time they deserve a touch more of a spotlight. For starters, their design, in a vacuum, is perfection. But outside a vacuum, they were most likely inspired by this delightful section from Disney's Fantasia. Conceptually, they serve a role somewhat similar to metal slimes from the Dragon Quest series. Rare, inaggressive enemies that can give generous rewards, but tend to flee before you can get them. But now that we have magic, we can crack their little code. They'll shuffle between 3 emotes, fanning themselves to indicate they're hot, shivering to indicate they're cold, and drooping under a light to indicate they're, I'll get back to you on that one. So it's pretty simple. If they shiver, they want to be warmed up with fire. If they fan themselves, they want to be cooled down with blizzard. And by process of elimination, this last one means thunder. If you give them what they want 3 times, they'll pay out tons of magic orbs and an elemental shard matching the last spell you cast on them. The real prize, though, is for getting them with the same spell 3 times in a row, for which they'll give you an elemental arts, which is described in the menu as proof that a white mushroom acknowledged you as a master of that kind of magic. We can sell them for a pretty decent price, but we're going to want to hold on to one of each. In addition to that, getting the triple bonus doubles the chance they'll drop mystery goo, and that's gotta be worth it. That being said, the adorable designs and animations may become steadily less endearing as you stand there waiting for them to do the emote you want for 2 minutes before watching them disappear. Our next stop on the critical path is through that cottage, which will once again pop us out into the bizarre room, but this time on the ceiling. The Mome Raths Outgrabe, you say? That's a layered reference. The Mome Raths are these adorable little who's-its and what's-its from the film, but the name originally comes from a poem Lewis Carroll wrote called Jabberwocky, which was included in the second Wonderland book. A sort of exercise in linguistics centered around how words can convey meaning through phonics and context even when we don't know their meaning. Of which the second and last lines of the poem are, "All mimsy were the borogroves, and the Mome Raths outgrabe." Now Cheshire does sing the lines of this poem in the movie, so you could assume that this is just him being nonsensical.
All mimsy, o'er the border go, and the warmers outgrabe.
But in the poem, the line is used as somewhat of a sinister tone setter, similar to "It was a dark and stormy night," which does fit here in its way. Also, here's a fun fact I'm never gonna have a better excuse to share. Lewis Carroll invented the word chortle for this poem, so I guess he frickin' nailed that one. So all we have to do now is light these lamps and return to the floor, but the bizarre room has only just begun to earn its name, and there are many other angles of it to explore. In fact, I'd highly recommend not lighting these torches just now. Hey, Donald, I think this place is rubbing off on you. Hop through this hatch on the opposite side of the ceiling to wind up back in the Queen's Garden, but up on a semi-secret hedge, from which we'll get a weapon for our gummy ship. Now let's start from the beginning. That same route that dropped us from the faucet now puts us on that wall, and we can see the entrance we just used to get to the ceiling. Funky. We can now activate the faucet, causing the water to flow sideways, filling up this pot with existence. We can jump into the newly existing pot and get another rare gummy on the hedge. Enter the door on the side of the tree to get to the opposite side of that same wall. Walk up to this pot to make it exist, letting us explore the whole wall freely. The last entrance we can reach in the Lotus Forest is up here, but it is a bit of a puzzle to reach. We need this tree turned so its branch bridges the gap, but we can only get the shrinking nut when it's towards us. Of course, we drop the nut and turn the tree before eating it, but that absolutely stumped me as a kid. Luckily, there's a second way onto this wall, but this one takes a bit of creative thinking. You have to consider that the fireplace might be an entrance. Either way, both cool bits of problem solving, and a clever bit of world design giving you 2 routes to this wall. Here we can light these candles. One makes this lion spit out a defense up. Stat ups all go onto Sora, no questions asked. And the other creates this painting, which we can travel through to reach a secret room in the Lotus Forest. Here there are 2 more flowers begging for items. They're both pretty worthwhile though, and a new kind of flower. This one says, "Shock me when struck, don't mind if I do." The particle effects alone are worth it, but we also got another trio of Dalmatians. I'm gonna be right back. We got one on the couch, one more under the table, and one in the back over here. Back out of the painting, which by the way depicts the setting of the walrus in the Carpenter poem recited to Alice, which in turn makes this sun and moon the only representation of Tweedledee and Tweedledum in this game. Last thing we can do on this wall is assault this poor defenseless teddy bear. It's okay, we just wanted to give him a comfier seat on the couch. Now we've got to reach him as not Tiny Sora, and here's my pro tip for Wonderland. Since we can only interact with things outside of combat, and this room is brimming with Heartless, just go to the gummy ship from the courtyard and land in the rabbit hole. It is infinitely faster. Speaking of the rabbit hole, it now has a new batch of Heartless for us to fight, and a new reward for taking them down, a Mega Potion. Now we can read this book that turned real thanks to Teddy, and find some more Mithril. If we attempt to read the book again, how have I not seen this used as a reaction image in this community? Y'all are slacking. Hurl the bear to the next seat and trade the book's existence for the clock. Now we can push the clock and find, nothing important. Okay, no, that is important, but if you move the bear after moving the clock, it pulls this move. Odd, but kinda satisfying. Through that door, we'll find a dark matter, one of the rarest materials in the game. Now let's head back to that wall and talk about all this. Gravity's spatial reasoning shenanigans are fantastic, but they're not actually all that hard to pull off the way it's done here. All they have to do is make each instance of the bazaar room its own area, and make it look exactly the same, just on a different axis. You can tell this is the case only by a few small things, like the absence of the Trinity mark in the fireplace. But what is impressive is the continuity. Moving the bear and the clock while right side up causes them to be moved over here as well. We can even use the door and it will send us to the same place. In fact, even a few of the loading zones in here we'd have absolutely no business reaching maintain continuity. I love this game. One last stop before we carry on. Grow big, shove this boulder, and use the new Lotus platforms to hop into the clearing with a Trinity, another set of Thunder Bells, and a flower that wants a high potion.
This should help.
And our final route to the Queen's Courtyard yields another set of Dalmatians. Another moment, please. That batch is somewhat significant. All three are in the dining room, another under the table and one by the china cabinet, and one that adorably follows you all around the room. If I'm not mistaken, though I very well could be because there's so many Dalmatians, this is one of the only puppies we know the name of. This one is meant to be Pepper, a puppy that's never directly pointed out in the film, but is mentioned by name.
Lucky Patch Pepper.
And look how cute he is, even if he's not the brightest bulb in the bunch. One last thing in the Lotus Forest, there's a treasure over here which they definitely didn't intend to be gotten this early, but this jump up here is surprisingly doable. Okay, let's wrap up this world, shall we? Head on back to the courtyard, stock your entire party full of potions, and head on into the bazaar room floor. Cheshire's still Cheshiring, but before climbing up to the table, check the flower we materialized when we lit that first lamp, and it'll shower us with goodies. Are you prepared for the worst? If not, too bad. Trickmaster, the first real roadblock on our journey. True to his name, this is not going to be a straightforward fight. Trickmaster cannot be damaged from the waist down, so to hit him from the ground you'll have to repeatedly jump and do single hits only, as only the first strike's high enough to reach. Otherwise, you'll need to gain a vantage point and leap at him to do a full combo. Now, his only attacks in the first phase are the horizontal swing and the downward swing. Fairly clear telegraphs, and nothing too special, apart from a hitbox that's way higher than it looks. These are best dodged by simply clearing the area, but if he's not winding up, keep up the pressure. What makes Trickmaster unique, apart from his height, is his ability to manipulate the environment. He can smash the table or chair into the ground, removing them as options for the high ground. He can also sing a little song, which makes the table spin right round baby right round. All things that are quite a hindrance, as using these vantage points is helpful defensively as well as offensively. When on the ground, he'll only use his diagonal swing, which is significantly stronger than the horizontal swing only used when you're higher up. All things considered, his first phase really isn't anything too threatening. Okay, alright, watch Donald and Goofy here. A lot of people will tell you not to bother stocking Dabbit and Goofstella with items because they'll basically all just go to waste. And yeah, that's a definite risk, but if even one of those potions does end up going to you, it could make all the difference. So I do recommend it, but only if you have the items to spare. Anyway, phase 2 is where things really heat up. After falling to about half HP, Trickmaster will make his way over to the stove and ignite his juggling clubs. This turns him into a whole new beast. Both his swings gain a fire elemental aspect, his downward swing does more damage, and probably most threatening, his clubs become persistent hitboxes that can be deadly even while he's stunned. On top of that, he gains 2 new ranged attacks, Fire and Fire. Both can be deflected, but the fact they travel at different speeds makes them a bit disorienting, and the sheer volume of fire projectiles practically ensures you'll be taking a hit. Basically, success in this phase all comes down to how effectively you can evade or return these flaming projectiles. Hiding beneath the furniture is probably your best bet if you're not confident in hitting them back, though of course he can remove your cover pretty easily. And your only real game plan here is to just wait for his clubs to go out and get your licks in while he relights them, which is a pretty slow strategy. If you chose the shield in Awakening, you may have already obtained the guard ability. That can be an invaluable asset in deflecting these fireballs. I highly recommend it. Worry not if you don't have it though, as we're gonna get into this guy's many unique properties and weaknesses. You'd think with his affinity for fire he'd be weak to blizzard, but in fact he's resistant to it. What he is weak to is thunder. Once again, he isn't weak in the traditional sense. He takes the same amount of damage most Heartless do, but he can be stunned by it. When he's stunned, he's kind enough to drop some health and hang out in ideal attack range for a while. He grows more resistant to the stun the further into the fight we get, but if you save your magic through the first phase and unleash it on him in phase 2, you can pretty much ignore any fiery complications. He can also be stunned by simply doing lots of damage, so you might consider evading him until your pals bring him to his knees, but again, that'd be a very slow strategy. Blizzard does still have its uses in this fight. It can be used to extinguish his clubs and even get you a bunch of magic for pulling it off, but it's tricky. They're not exactly static targets, and even when they are, sometimes they just refuse to go out. There's another target you can focus your ice on though, and that's the stove. If you fire 3 blizzards into this grate at the base, it'll go out. The problem is, if Trickmaster's clubs are already lit, he can use them to reignite it. This is sort of a puzzle in its way, fitting for the finale of this world. Notice that the stove is lit at the start of this fight. It's a common misconception Trickmaster lights the stove at the start of his second phase, but if at the start of the fight you book it over to the stove and douse the flames, that's just it. No more second phase. You have effectively deleted half of Trickmaster's kit. That's gotta be number 2 or 3 on the list of things I wish I'd known about this game as a kid. It's like cutting the boss off at the weird double knees. He's pathetic without his fire. Just don't be stupid and relight them for him. And maybe pray that Donald doesn't either. And you should be home free. On that note, let's talk design again. Trickmaster is striking. His weird paper streamer arms, his 5 heads, the odd placement of his Heartless emblem. Of course, we have another final mix recolor here, but I honestly don't mind this one. It's grown on me. Without context, the original looks way cleaner. The black, red, and gold, it's an opulent color scheme that apes the Queen of Hearts, with its clubs bearing the Cheshire Cat's colors. But its new colors lean further towards Cheshire, while also blending into this room as a whole. Thinking about our journey to make this creature appear, we were led to it by that cat. Was he helping us, or are they in league? Is the Cheshire Cat a Heartless? Read all about it in my edgy fanfiction. No, it's at the very least a bit more thought-provoking, but yeah, I miss the red and gold. With Trickmaster defeated, we get this intriguing scene of Sora shoving a beam of light down the doorknob's throat. Sora, I think you have to ask before you do something like that. Here's something cool. This keyhole is a part of the door's model, but only when viewed from the walls and ceiling. Yeah, how many of you spotted that from way over here? With a mysterious gummy acquired, we are free to leave Wonderland behind, though I will at least mention there is once again new dialogue in the Courtyard. Honestly, it's pretty lucky the Queen doesn't just sentence us to death, but maybe she figures we're too powerful after seeing us in action. That's not quite the end though. We can take our newly acquired Blizzard spell back to Traverse Town and use it to put out Cid's fireplace. Ooh. No, for real, there's a treasure over at Cafe Francia, which refuses to open. It'll only unlock if we can keep all 4 of these candles extinguished at once. What's weird is that the time for them to relight is more than generous enough that we can get them all with melee attacks, but the game outright won't let you. It just cheats and says, nuh-uh. So what it wants to ensure is that the last candle we put out is put out by Blizzard, for which we get another defense up. Yes, there's something we can do around here with Thunder, but once again, I'll save that for when we properly take on Olympus. Before I get ahead of myself though, Wonderland. Would I be going too far to say that from a mechanical standpoint, it's the best level in all of Kingdom Hearts? The multifaceted gimmicks of growing and shrinking, of bizarre warps and loading zones, gravity, spatial reasoning, creative problem solving, a satisfying puzzle or two, and a boss fight that embodies all of it. Wonderland is such an amazing first impression to the Disney magic Kingdom Hearts is capable of capturing. It's only 5 rooms, but all but one of them interlocks and weaves through the others with all these nonsensical doorways, shrinking down and exploring an area from all these perspectives. Well, it should be no surprise that's right up my alley. Story-wise, it's more setup than anything. The Heartless abound, and apparently their prerogative is to kidnap from time to time, and we can only guess at why. The Queen of Hearts is also a fun villain to consider lore-wise. You have to be exceptionally capable in order to defend yourself from the Heartless, which doesn't seem to describe the Queen or her guards, but apparently she has her ways. Perhaps she's not called the Queen of Hearts for nothing. Thematically, we get more of that idea of adults lording over children, with the Queen herself probably being the purest possible embodiment of that idea until we get a Matilda world.
I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it.
But the light versus darkness themes get a neat touch as well, with the lamps on the ceiling. It circles back to what our mysterious guide told us back in The Awakening. Light doesn't chase away the darkness, darkness rises in opposition to it. always balancing each other out in equal measure. More to look out for going forward. I can only say, I'm hungry to explore further. Though I do think Wonderland's mechanics are in a league of their own, that's absolutely not to say we have nothing else to look forward to. If you're looking forward to the next world, my breakdown of it is already up on Patreon for all of my patrons to see. To become a patron and watch it for yourself, check out the link in the description. And I hope to be giving you my heartfelt thanks, along with Amiri the Grey. It's good to have you back. Don't worry about her hiatus, I was informed her planet needed her, and she's back now, so she must have saved it. It's Ciel though, who can win a marathon by doing the backstroke along the track. And Raven, who I once saw pull a fortune out of a fortune cookie without breaking it, and the fortune said it knew he was gonna do that. Additional thanks to Janku, Drooling, Chris Braydell, Jojo Dwagon, and the many, many other patrons who make this possible. You're all mad here, and I'll see you in the next one.